We're grateful for our panelists today. I will make brief introductions for each of them, and then we will turn the time over to them for their presentations. We'll be privileged first to hear from Christine de Marcellus Vollmer from the country of Venezuela. Ms. Vollmer is the founder and president of the Alliance for the Family and the Latin American Alliance for the Family, or AFLA. She's a member of the Pontifical Council for the Family for over 15 years and is a founding member of the Pontifical Academy for Life. She has served as a member of the delegation of the Holy See to the United Nations from 1990 to 1995. As president of the World Organization for the Family and member of the World Congress of Families planning committees, she has organized conferences all over Europe and Latin America. Since 1984, she has led a team with the Alliance for the Family to develop a new pedagogy to effectively teach children and young people the necessary values, virtues, and skills for successful marriages and family life. She will be presenting and sharing with us this international curriculum for teaching ethics in schools. On a personal note, my wife, we'll make all the introductions, and then but I'm so glad that Ms. Vollmer is here. On a personal note, I've wanted to add this. I've been looking forward to meeting her these many months as we've been planning. My wife, Janet Erickson, attended the Second World Congress of Families in Geneva, Switzerland, and she remembers very powerfully the information that Ms. Vollmer shared during that Congress stuck with her. She was then 24 years old. She would go on to receive a PhD in family life and then teach at Brigham Young University as an assistant professor there. The impact that that conference had on my wife was profound. She describes it as transformative, and it's been a privilege for us to see Christine again and to welcome her. We'll be looking forward to hearing from her. After Christine, we'll hear from Professor Lynn Wardle, who is the Bruce C. Hafen Professor of Law in the J. Reuben Clark Law Society at Brigham Young University. Professor Wardle has been president of the International Academy for the Study of the Jurisprudence of the Family. He has also served as president of the International Society for Family Law. Professor Wardle has lectured and taught about family law and policy issues in more than 20 nations. He has testified before congressional committees and consulted with lawmakers on family policy at both the state and federal level. I'm also grateful for my personal connection to Professor Wardle. I was his student at the J. Reuben Clark Law Society and was grateful for his class on the foundations of the Constitution. It was one of the most memorable classes that I had in law school as we read line by line through the debates of the Constitutional Convention. I will never forget Professor Wardle leading us through that great founding of the Constitution and of our constitutional form of government. How important it is that we study the very words of the founders of the nation. And Professor Wardle has a love for education, for morals in education. He saw those morals at the founding of our nation, and he instilled those morals into his students at the J. Reuben Clark Law Society. Finally, we'll be privileged to hear from Dr. Tim Rarick. Dr. Rarick received his PhD in Human Development and Family Studies from Kansas State University in 2011. He currently teaches in the Department of Home and Family at Brigham Young University, Idaho. I was pleased to review the website of the Department of Home and Family Studies there at BYU, Idaho, and read this sentence about, among its mission purpose, to teach principles of the gospel and secular truth, including theories, research, philosophies, and practical skills that help strengthen the home and the family. Dr. Rarick, through his initiative, has helped the university to implement a marriage and family advocacy major. Did I get that name right, Tim? Thank you. The marriage and family advocacy major, where he has, if I'm recalling from our conversation yesterday, was it 1,600 students that online for marriage and family studies? And how many students are participating in your major, Dr. Rarick? Okay, so the number's still coming in, so just launched, but he's been doing a great work there at BYU, Idaho, with on his own initiative to seek to have an opportunity for students there to be majoring in advocacy for the marriage and the family. So we are pleased to hear from all three of these presenters. We will turn the time over now to Christine Vollmer. Please join me in welcoming her.
Well, good afternoon. After that wonderful introduction, I feel a little bit cowed. But anyway, I'm going to talk to you about this curriculum. I think all of us here understand the role of morals and ethics in education, and that these are indispensable. So that's not the topic today. Values-free education has taken too many young people, families, and even our culture in the wrong direction, and the entire world is crying out for a remedy of some sort. Frequently, what I've seen all over the world, people don't even know what's wrong, but they know something is. They see the statistics of the ruined lives, and so what we're going to talk about is what we decided to do about it. I've been in the pro-life thing since 1981, and then got into the pro-family, and then looking at the root of the problem, evidently it's a problem of understanding what life is about. In the days of my parents and grandparents, before and during the Great World Wars, what was known as education was in fact the process of forming ethical, moral young adults equipped with all the knowledge they would need in order to found and bring up an ethical, moral family. That was an unquestioned fact. It was an unquestioned need. It was only after the two world wars that the ideology of relativism was gradually introduced, and those who are my age saw it happen stage by stage. Morals and virtues became words considered hostile, judgmental, totally politically incorrect. So it really is wonderful to be here today with so many people who think as I do. There are, and I've been speaking to some of them here, experts who explain how this ideology took over, who was behind it, and why. But I will limit my words today to what we wanted to do about it. In holding up a mirror, How Civilizations Decline, the British historian Anne Glyn Jones demonstrates how each ancient civilization started its decline by first losing belief in its gods, then, this is interesting, vulgarizing theater. Theater had been organized and invented as a method to transmit deep meaning. And finally, they would vulgarize it until finally it became obscene in each of these examples. Finally, these civilizations lost all moral norms, ending in promiscuity, homosexuality, the refusal to procreate, and inevitable financial collapse. Our civilization is different from the others in three important ways. One, the speed of communication has sped up the cycle, and so we witness clearly what is happening. Another very important difference, and which should be conclusive, is that we have Christianity and the totally coherent message of Christ and his civilization of love. The Greeks and the Romans didn't have that. Neither did the Babylonians nor any of those ancients. So they were just in the dark. The third difference between our civilizations and those that went before is the clue to why the first two differences are not having their logical effect. And that third difference is that since the 1930s, a mega business called sex education grew up, fueled by a racist, eugenic mentality. The Sanger birth controllers dreamed of a pill that could be forced on the unfit, and the capitalist backers of this woman dreamed of a pill that would be taken by every woman in the world every day. That's an enormous business. Once millions of married women were convinced to take that pill, The target was lowered to singles and then to adolescents, now to little girls of 12 or under. That's in Britain anyway. The sales pitch was not immediately obvious, as it was disguised as a new and necessary course for schools, sex education. In order for this new sales campaign to be acceptable, morals had to be drastically relativized. The so-called sex education did exactly this while piquing the salacious curiosity they were encouraging and making normal. With the collusion of the press, new attitudes were made popular, and the need for sex education in the schools was accepted. Well, we all know where this led, and there is no need to go over the statistics in moral, matrimonial, and family breakdown, nor those of the STDs, nor the young hearts broken and lives destroyed by all these things. But we do need to understand the progression of events that I've just gone over so quickly over the last 4 or 5 decades. We need to know this progression of events in order to put these events into reverse. Using the schools, our culture was undermined by a certain logic which was infiltrated to subvert the moral code of an entire nation and then exported to others. To reverse this, we need to reinstate a correct moral reasoning. Correct moral reasoning is a form of logic based upon the reality of the human person in his or her spiritual, emotional, and corporal nature and complexity. This moral reasoning was in former times learned through the close-knit family and extended kin. It was learned through the realities of rural life and the exigencies of survival. Ethics and morals cannot be simply dictated or imposed. They cannot simply be learned as to what can be done and what cannot be done. The dynamics of youth, changing situations, and outside influences will always show this method to be fragile. It works to a degree, but it's fragile. Children and adolescents, in order to become convinced, responsible, moral adults, must develop a sound moral reasoning which will guide them through all of their lives. Children and adolescents are in successive phases of brain development, and these phases are extremely important in the process of acquiring correct moral reasoning. It is at these stages that the thought patterns are laid down, as is now known scientifically, and known in former times empirically. All through history, people have told the 3-year-old this way, the 4-year-old another way, the 5-year-old they've treated, they reason differently, and that this comes naturally to parents if the parents have received it themselves and if they're with their children. Our goal at ALAFA has been to roll back the damage done to the thinking and reasoning about human relations of 4 generations of young people through this horrible sex education by supplying a method of teaching right reasoning which will allow children and adolescents to understand and embrace at each stage of their development what is right, moral, and ethical, and understand why. The idea is to give them the tools to build for themselves criteria for determining what is right in all the areas. Freedom to choose what is good. And this applies not only to sexual and family matters, but to community and professional areas as well, as these have also fallen victim to relativity, materialism, and egotism in the me generation. In our work, we have been fortunate to be able to stand on the shoulders of the great names in psychology, philosophy, anthropology, and brain development, as well as the great pioneers of the art of hands-on and experience-rich teaching in the sciences fits our approach beautifully, and we are in fact now actively allied with the Academy of Sciences of Latin America, ACAL, in this respect. 25 years of development of this program have been exciting and rewarding. we've been able to explore an enormous amount of fundamental thinking. From Aristotle, who was convinced that the only effective way to teach children and young people was through stories, same thing with our Lord, I must say, right through to Viktor Frankl and his discoveries about the neurological need for a life of transcendence. Many great men and women have been our sources. From Aristotle, we took the idea of using a story to situate the reader of whichever age, 6 to 18, within situations which are familiar, universal, surrounded by a great variety of others of the same age. Using an exciting story appropriate to each grade level and the corresponding development of the pupil, it is possible to show many facets of behavior in universally recognizable situations. The variety of characters in the story precludes stereotyping and are an aid to understanding others, both boys and girls. They're reading about people just like themselves. In order to facilitate getting this program into government schools, which is one of our goals, more difficult and ambitious goals, where it is the most needed, we opted to avoid religious language, although this curriculum is entirely about acquiring and learning to live what are obviously Christian virtues, as well as universal values. The anthropology of Karol Wojtyła, John Paul II, to be found in his Love and Responsibility, has been a sure guide for our approach to friendship, sexuality, and marriage. This said, let me give you a brief look at the books themselves. There are 13 of them, from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. Each book contains 35 chapters, 1 hour a week, all through the school year. Each book is matched with a teacher guide, which helps the teacher to understand the objective of each lesson and suggests activities and discussion points. The early years are pretty much centered on the values of sports, school, and friendship. The later 6 are more focused on applying those values to the changing feelings and attitudes of adolescence, attraction, feeling for the opposite sex, as well as learning the skills of negotiation and decision-taking with a certain emphasis on how to debate and how to hold one's own. In these books, community service leads on from a habit developed in the younger years of helping in the house. It goes on to community service, and in the last book, even we get into attitudes towards politics and politicians. Now, I'll just hold some of these up. This is for the 10-year-olds, and it has this, this fun story in 35 chapters. It has little exercises as well, and it's all about sports, and it's rather amusingly done. And the kids, they're able to live in their imagination all the things that children are feeling and suffering as they want to be a good team member and everything. Just, I want to be chosen to be on the team, and the mistakes they made, the failures and the triumphs, and not to be too proud of yourself because the other time you didn't do it as well. And so all those things come into it. We lead on from there to, I'm not showing you the first 2 books because they're just about sort of what is a family and what is a person and so on, and nature. Then we get into caring and sharing, and again, the story continues. It's Charlie and his cousin Alice and all their friends, and they meet an awful lot of, universal situations, the temptation to cheat and the friends and so on. And we've put into it certain bits and pieces of universal knowledge that they ought to know about, and some famous people, because I find that children are getting very insular. Then for the 10-year-old, that's 8, 9, 10, this is different and complementary, and here we talk about all the differences there are in the world. Human beings are the same everywhere. They need shelter, clothes, food, and love, but they live in different circumstances, and that we have to accept people as they are, and so on. That we do quite a lot about the difference between men and women, very scientifically. In fact, there's one amusing part where the teacher says, well, class, you know that boys or men have bigger brains than women. And so all the boys all say, yay, and she says, yes, but did you know that women have more neurons? Oh. So, so we mix a story with scientific stuff that they ought to know and that will protect them against some of this gender stuff. Then when this is 11, 12, when they're beginning to be pre-adolescents, it's all about friendship, all the different kinds of friendship, the real ones, the learning to be loyal when your friend isn't there and that kind of thing. So we feel that friendship, to have a real basis in what is really friendship, that is the best basis for marriage. And then the following one, this is changes and challenges. It's a bit thicker because it's all about adolescents and their changing attitudes and why they have changing attitudes, because those attitudes are good if they know how to channel them right. Wanting to be like other people, but wanting to be unique, and wanting to be free, but knowing they can't be, and all of that. What else do we have here? We have, well, there are a whole lot more. I won't show you all of them. But the teacher's guide is very complete, so that the teacher doesn't really have to do any work. We have a teacher training course of 16 hours where we give them elements of anthropology and psychology and brain development and all those things. And here, this is rather cute because it's just been published by the, it's just the same inside, but this is Korean, just been published in Korea. And it's just been published in Poland. We have, don't know if we have here did you bring the African version? No? We have an African version about to be published in Nairobi for Kenya. And translations are going into French, German, Hungarian, Croatian, and so on. Anyway, this program, seemingly so much fun, thank you so much, is actually a very serious proposal to reconstruct our world culture. The anthropology underlying the entire system of the program is universal because it answers to the reality of the human person in the spiritual, emotional, and corporal levels that are the same on every continent and in every age. For this reason, Alive to the World is now being published in 7 different countries of Latin America, plus Brazil, and then Korea and all these other countries that I was mentioning. The Polish edition is rather interesting. They asked us for the license to publish also in English, because they said Kazakhstan and all those eastern countries, everyone's learning English, and they thought this would be a good way for them to learn English and get the benefits of the contents at the same time. So in Venezuela, where this program originated, and that we call our laboratory, the social experiment has been absolutely mind-blowing. We have concentrated on entering the schools of the most difficult and abandoned slums. In these areas where family breakdown is the norm, where justice and safety are not taken for granted, the pupils of all ages adore these books. They see in them the path to the human dignity that they instinctively know they are due. Every baby that's born into the world knows that he's special or she's special, and that dignity they know that that's part of their birthright. It's so interesting. The teachers love this program because school violence, a terrible plague, which interestingly, bullying there isn't to the students, it's the teachers who get beat up or mud slung at them or something. It victimizes principally the teachers. And this violence disappears. Within a couple of months, the school calms down. And interestingly, we're working with Chavista schools, really communist, the most pathetic places you can think of. And these teachers adore what we're doing. And we've had moments when the ministry has said, we're not allowing any more private programs. You've got to take that out. And schools say, no, we have to keep this one in. So the human person tends to good, even though we're all prone to temptation. Children and adolescents the world over dream of true love, of being someone, of having a constructive life. They were created for this. They deserve it. And it is our duty and responsibility to give them the tools to reach these God-given goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. We will now hear from Professor Lynn Wardle.
I'm honored to be participating in this session with Dr. Vollmer, who is worldwide known for her work in defense of the family and in defense of the unborn, and also with Dr. Rarick, who is a brilliant young and creative university professor and whose work is very promising and for the future. I want to begin by saying that it's important for us to remember to be compassionate, kind, and considerate of all those with whom we disagree. Things that we hold value very highly and hold dearly may not be held in the same value or with the same dear affection by all other people, and we must. It's important to interact with kindness and compassion when we have discussions with them. Certainly, we should express our views and defend our positions, but do so always with compassion and generosity. I guess what Christine Vollmer said at the beginning of her talk, that she alluded to the fact that morals and ethics are learned first in the home, summarizes my presentation. We live in a very complex world that's daily becoming more complicated. Mastery of dozens, perhaps hundreds of technical skills and technologies is now required to meet the needs of ourselves and our families. Such evolution in the direction of greater complexity has been the experience of individuals and societies for centuries, perhaps millennia. One succinct example: when I was in elementary school, I only had to know how to use a pencil and an eraser. Today, my grandchildren must use a large number and variety of computer programs in the course of their daily life and grade school education. Our world and our lives have become much more complicated and technical. Yet, in our quest to keep up with changing technologies of our world, it's important to not overlook education and values and morals. We need to understand foundational principles and fully comprehend basic moral and ethical values to make sense of the ever-increasing cascade of new technologies, information, and knowledge. Education in science, math, social sciences, history, literature, politics, law, and so forth is inadequate without matching education in moral and ethical values. Much of the most important practical education in morality and ethics is learned by example and by practice in the home. But reaffirming school education is needed to explain the meaning and the coherent principles behind such life experience education in morals and ethics. The importance of teaching moral and ethical values in general education is not a modern discovery. Rather, morality and ethics have been at the core of enlightened education throughout history, especially throughout American history. So I'm going to begin with the founding era. In 1787, Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance, creating a territory, and as part of their law creating that new territory, they established a university and said, religion and morality and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. You see the foundational importance of morals at that time period, that it was integrated with, a part of, critical to education. John Adams wrote, "It should be your care, therefore, and mine, to elevate the minds of our children and exalt their courage to accelerate and animate their industry and activity, to excite in them an habitual contempt of meanness, abhorrence, and injustice and inhumanity, and an ambition to excel in every capacity, faculty, and virtue. If we suffer their minds to grovel and creep in infancy, they will grovel all their lives. Dr. Benjamin Rush, also in the founding era. The good education of youth has been esteemed by wise men in all ages as the surest foundation of the happiness both of private families and commonwealths. Almost all governments have therefore made it a principal object of their attention to establish and endow with proper revenues such seminaries of learning as might supply the succeeding age with men, we would add today, and women qualified to serve the public with honor to themselves and their country. Thomas Jefferson, when meaning moral sense is wanting, we endeavor to supply the defect by education. He said a lot more, but that's the key point. We encourage their industry, activity, habitual honesty. These are correctives which are supplied, he says at the bottom of this quote, by education. And so, again, education was intended to have convey moral values. Jefferson also said the objects of primary education determine its character and limits. The object would be to improve by reading his morals and faculty, to understand his duties. Another, to develop reasoning faculties in our youth, enlarge their minds, cultivate their morals, and instill in them precepts of virtue and order, and generally form them to habits of reflection and correct action, rendering them examples of virtue to others and of happiness within these themselves. These are the objects of education. The Massachusetts Constitution of 1780, which in large part is still in effect in that state today. Wisdom and knowledge, as well as virtue, diffused generally among the body of the people, being necessary for the preservation of their rights and liberties, as these depend on spreading the opportunities and advantages of education in the various parts of the country. They're establishing schools, and here's why, says the Constitution. To countenance and inculcate the principles of humanity and general benevolence, public and private charity, industry and frugality, honesty and punctuality in their dealings, sincerity, good humor, and all social affections, and general sentiments among the people. Again, the purpose of education includes, in this constitutional provision in Massachusetts, to inculcate moral values. Noah Webster. When I speak of diffusion of knowledge, I do not mean a mere knowledge of spelling books or New Testament. An acquaintance with ethics and with general principles of law, commerce, money, and government is necessary for the yeomanry of the Republican state. It's necessary. They thought it was foundational. It's the substructure on which the superstructure of our constitutional system of government is built. It's the foundation. Webster continued, every small school district should be furnished with a school at least 4 months in a year when boys are not otherwise employed. Should be kept by the most reputable and well-informed men. Here children should be taught usual branches of learning, submission to superiors and to laws, the moral and social duties, the principles of virtue and good behavior inculcated. The virtues of men are of more consequence to society than their abilities. And for this reason, the heart should be cultivated with more assiduity than the head. It was very, very thoughtful statements made essentially 2 generations ago. We can continue up to this time. These quotes are from Dr. John Chafee, who's the director of the New York Center for Critical Thinking. He's a philosophy professor in New York City. In spite of increased emphasis on technical training within the college curriculum, there is growing realization that the humanities in general and ethics in particular are vital to the student's personal development and moral enlightenment. The study of ethics provides a framework incorporating a moral discipline and moral discernment. a framework within which intelligent and enlightened moral decisions can be made. The development of the type of critical thinking skills found in the humanities in general and in ethics in particular is of crucial importance on a much more profound level of practicality. We tend to think of these as abstractions. They're not. They are the foundation on which daily living and the day-to-day implementation and practice of other education areas, disciplines, and skills are based. Ethical training is essential for students to grow in wisdom, not simply in cleverness. Isn't that a good way to put it? We can train them to be clever, but of what good can they do if they're only clever without a moral foundation to guide them, without a moral compass to point the way? The final bullet point, our ability to understand, to successfully deal with critical, that is, ethical issues, will determine what our future will be. Dr. Chafee continues, values lie at the heart of our experience and serve as the catalysts for action. Ethical inquiry gives us the opportunity to illuminate the meaning of that experience and the ability to shape our lives in consonance with a morally enlightened awareness. That's what we need. We need to have this compass, these values, these standards. Most ambitious human endeavors carry price tags. Progress often means the severing of our links with the past. And that's the concern. We can become so preoccupied, obsessed with mastering the latest computer program or technology that we forget the lessons of the past. And if we forget them, we are sadly doomed to repeat them. Thomas Sobel, an educator in New York, the reason for studying ethics lie in the nature of education, schools, and leadership. Education is an inherently moral matter. It's a very profound insight. Moral education historically was inculcated first and most importantly and most effectively in the family. But as you know, marital families have been in decline. And that's of growing concern because as the family declines, more and more of the burden of inculcating morality, ethical values, falls upon other institutions, primarily the state. One example, there are fewer adults married today than in recent history. The silent generation in 1960, 65, this is people ages 18 to 32 in that year, 65% of the silent generation were married. The baby boomer generation, 48% were married during those years. Gen Xers, 36% were married. And now the millennials, only 26% of them who are between ages 18 and 32 are married. Marriage has lost its appeal. It used to be a rite of passage showing that you were mature, that you were an adult. Now it seems to be a burden, something that encumbers. Signs of the marriage crisis, the loss of respect for marriage. These are two questions asked of Gen Xers. One was, what's the most important thing in your life, or that you, they asked, being a good parent or having a successful marriage. In 1997, the Gen Xers, 42% said being a good parent. A decade, 13 years later, in 2010, the millennials, 52% said that was most important. So parenting rose in importance. About having a successful marriage, 35% in 1997, down to 30% in 2010. You can be a parent without having a marriage, and having a successful parentage is important, but having a successful marriage is not. The proportion of adults 15 and older who are married has fallen from about 70% in 1960 to the mid-50s in 2010 for both men and women. Percentage of married adults has fallen for all races. You just see between 1950 and 2010, For male and female, down. For whites, for blacks, for Hispanics, same trajectory. For Asians, it went down, but it seems to be rebounding a bit, thankfully for that community. This is the number of children who are, the annual marriage rate, showing the number of individuals 14 and older who are married out of 1,000, dropped from 90.2 to 36.0 from 1950 to 2009. A story in the Deseret News a few months ago, marriage rate hits new low and is expected to continue to decline. The age of marriage has risen steadily. This is good news and bad news. Less likely to have rushed, immature, hasty teenage marriages that are ill-considered. But also there seems to be a lot of sexual activity outside of marriage because people want that kind of intimacy, but they're afraid to, unwilling to make the commitment of marriage, in many respects due to fear of marriage because of the heartache and grief and sorrow they saw in their parents' lives when they came home in 7th grade and saw their mother weeping uncontrollably in the kitchen because dad had walked out, or things like that that have caused people to be wary of marriage rather than to welcome. Marriage is also sort of the flip side of cohabitation. As marriage rates have declined, cohabitation rates have skyrocketed. In 1960, just 1% of all couples living together were unmarried. Today, it's over 10%, as this statistic shows. Unmarried cohabitations, this is by numbers. 500,000 in 1970, over 7.5 million in 2010. These are American statistics. Cohabitation is replacing marriage as the first union in this country. They lived together first. 2/3 of all women getting married have cohabited. American women getting married have cohabited prior to marriage. Nearly 9 out of 10 couples married in the late 1950s remain married for at least 10 years. Today, only 7 out of 10 couples married in the 1990s were still married after 10 years. It's a significant drop in just essentially a generation. And this shows for men, and that shows the same trajectory for women. Nearly 1/3 of Americans born in 1950 had divorced by age 45. In 1940, fewer than 90,000 children were born out of wedlock. In 2010, 1.8 million children were born out of wedlock. That's an increase of almost 20-fold. 1940, less than 4% of all births were to unmarried women. Today, 40% of all births are to unmarried women. And this is just some of the statistics again. The birth rate for unmarried women now is almost the same as it is for married women. You can see how that has changed. In 1960, 21.6 out of 1,000 women, unmarried women, gave birth, whereas 156.6 married women gave birth out of 1,000 married women. Dropped for marriage and risen for unmarried. I've got 1 minute, Scott. Thank you. Well, I will skip through this. A lot more statistics showing that this shows the number of children 18 years old living with a single parent. It's about 69%. In the African American community, 69% have 2 parents, 39% in the African American community. And that has an impact on children. The word ethics comes from a Greek word meaning theory of living. We manifest our ethics by how we live. Our law and our legal system is based on ethics. The only question is what ethics, what values will they reflect? Bad laws and bad legal decisions erode high moral values and substitute corrupt political values. So we must work to prevent and correct corrupt laws and bad judicial decisions. President Gordon B. Hinckley made this statement when he came and spoke at BYU a few years ago, 20 years ago. You're good, but it's not just enough to be good. You must be good for something. You must contribute good to the world. The world must be a better place for your presence. The good that is in you must spread to others. The summum bonum is education and moral and ethical values takes time, patience, and diligence. It's not discrete or bounded. It's continuous and ongoing, yet it gives meaning and value to other kinds of education, and it provides the most secure foundation for a meaningful, service-giving, fulfilling career, family, and personal life, and for a just society. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wardle. We'll now hear from our final speaker, Dr. Tim Rarick.
Thank you. Give me about 30 seconds. I'm just going to set up my stuff. Hopefully this works. Okay. So, I'm going to take I appreciate both Christine and Professor Wardle's words because it sets the foundation pretty much for what I wanted to hit on. A few disclaimers before I jump into this, and that is I'm not going to give every possible answer to the concerns I raise. There's enough books out there written on this and research, and there's great education reformers out there. I don't think I need to, but I'll point you in the right direction. I can give you resources if you need to. But if I don't unpack what's, I think, really undermining moral development in education and some common practices that are rampant, not just in the States, but throughout the world, then I don't think the remedies are going to have much value. So I'm going to be speaking on, and I think the two previous speakers, Professor Wardle and Christine, have both described what we should be able to teach in education, the content, and even the methods. I'm going to get deeper into the methods of some things that we do, disciplinary practices in education, and how we think we're teaching a lesson, but the lesson of morality is lost because we're too focused on something else. So let me get into what I mean. First, I want to echo what the two previous speakers also said. Urie Bronfenbrenner, the great theorist, researcher in my field, said the family is the most powerful, the most humane, and by far the most economical system known for building competence and character. So I had to put that out there first, too, because I don't think it's the educational system to develop this. However, with the family breaking down, divorce rates, and countless other threats to the family and the well-being of children, the educational system does have a role, and I think Professor Wardle made that very clear. And it's happening quite well with Christine's curriculum. So the family should be doing this, but education, what can education do to help build this as well? Well, this is in the system of, I'm not going to get into all this, but in Bronfenbrenner's theory or in his model, he has the person in the middle, and the person has different contexts that they develop in. So there's the family. The things that are closest to them have the greatest impact on the development of that person. The things that are furthest out, such as policy, especially at the international, national level, that would be more in the blue, although that still does trickle down and affect the developing child. But Bronfenbrenner's statement is that the family is the most powerful system and the most effective system for building character. But as you can see, next to the family, you see school or education. So I'm going to explore that a bit more. Okay, so what are morals? Well, here's a few definitions. Principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior. I think that's pretty straightforward. The degree which something is right and good, the moral goodness or badness of something. So, in this picture, is this student more focused on right and wrong or getting a decent grade? You got to pass this test or your grade's going to drop. So, I think it's pretty clear. She's more focused on getting a decent grade. So the morality or the moral of honesty and integrity somewhere was lost on the student. And maybe a stress about I've got to get an A or a B or I've got to pass this has overridden the student's desire to be moral. Let's go to character now. Okay, so what is character? The mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual, the unseen motives or reasons behind what we consistently think, say, or do. Okay, so it's as I'm going to say time and time again, it's good to know what's moral, but we also have to have the moral will and the moral skill, which really captures your character. The part of that, so another part of character, the part of us that dictates our behavior, especially when no one is looking. So our character really comes out when I'm on vacation, which I'm not on vacation right now, but I'm here and my wife and children aren't here, and what am I going to do when they're not around? My character is going to determine that. Okay, so another picture here on character. Which question do you feel the aggressive student is asking himself? A, how can I show that I am more powerful? Or B, I wonder how my actions are impacting his emotions and overall self-worth. Yes, A is probably the most likely answer. So, is this student lacking character? Maybe this is a weak moment, but bullying is rampant in schools. And I believe that one of the reasons is a loss of character and morality. So let's talk about that a bit more. So even though the demise of the family or the breakdown of the family is really a connection of the loss of morality, it's also the solution. But education doesn't seem to be doing much better in this regard. Okay, so something I want to say about that is zero-tolerance policies, which require out-of-school suspension or expulsion for certain inappropriate behaviors, have become the go-to disciplinary approach in many schools. But research suggests some downsides. Such punishments may not change students' behavior and are often meted out unfairly. And I would add, those punishments often can change behavior, but it's only temporarily. So it's like a short-term gain, long-term loss. So I'll talk a bit about the research on that. And I realize I'm going fast. I normally pace myself more, but I want to make sure I unpack this as well as I can. So what do the following pictures do you think have to do, and you don't have to shout it out. If this was a class, we would have a discussion, but have to do with morals and character. I was at the United Nations. I bring some students every year. We go to the Commission on the Status of Women and try to promote the families, the fundamental unit of society. Well, while I was on the metro, I saw some signs that I thought really were trying to teach morals. So I took some pictures. So, poles are for your safety, not your latest routine. Hold the pole, not our attention. A subway car is no place for showtime. Okay, so that's trying to teach moral, maybe try to help build character. It's a subway car, not a dining car. Maybe takeout, but please don't eat here. Next one. Offer your seat to an elderly, disabled, or pregnant person. Even better, add a smile. Another, keep the sound down, keep the music, games, and the phone's conversation to yourself. Please, let's keep personal devices personal. If you've noticed, there's the theme here of Captain Me Planet, of I haven't realized there's other people around me, really? So I need to pay attention to them and actually be... To me, this is part of the loss of morality, if we have to rely on the metro system to get us to wake up to the people around us. But I'm glad they're doing it. Okay, so don't take your litter with you. Here's one that's much more serious. Unwanted sexual conduct shouldn't be a part of anyone's commute. And then it gives a disclaimer or something about sexual misconduct. So these messages are teaching morals, but not the moral will and the moral skill or the character needed to go with it. So these messages are good. I don't want to disparage the messages at all. But it tells us something about our society when the metro is trying to teach morals, something right and wrong. Dr. Barry Schwartz is going to give a little breakdown of this. I don't know if I have audio. Do I have audio? I'm plugged in. It's a headphone jack. Maybe it wasn't to be. I would just let you watch what he's saying and read it, but it's not quite nearly as exciting. Okay. Well, that's okay. I will just tell you what he says. He gives a list of janitor duties here. In fact, I'll just let you see it as he's going. There's a list of janitor duties, and none of them are interesting, but none of them involve other people. mop the floors, clean the carpets, wash the or clean the toilets. So you can see all of them there. And then he tells stories of janitors at a hospital. In fact, he said this is for janitors at a hospital. And he says these could easily be done by janitors at a morgue. There's really no difference because there's no involvement of other people. And so, are you guys the tech guys? If you could help me with the audio. So the point he makes is that, and I've got this plugged in here for audio. Yeah, it's coming. What's that?
And all of the items on it are unremarkable.
I'll let him
They're the
tell
things you would expect. Mop the floors, sweep them, empty the trash, restock the cabinets. It may be a little surprising how many things there are, but it's not surprising what they are. But the one thing I want you to notice about them is this. Even though this is a very long list, there isn't a single thing on it that involves other human beings. Not one. The janitor's job could just as well be done in a mortuary as in a hospital. And yet, when some psychologists interviewed hospital janitors to get a sense of what they thought their jobs were like, they encountered Mike, who told them about how he stopped mopping the floor because Mr. Jones was out of his bed, getting a little exercise, trying to build up his strength, walking slowly up and down the hall. And Charlene told them about how she ignored her supervisor's admonition and didn't vacuum the visitors' lounge because there were some family members who were there all day, every day, who at this moment happened to be taking a nap. And then there was Luke, who washed the floor in a comatose young man's room twice because the man's father, who had been keeping a vigil for 6 months, didn't see Luke do it the first time, and his father was angry. And behavior like this from janitors, from technicians, from nurses, and if we're lucky every now and then from doctors, doesn't just make people feel a little better, it actually improves the quality of patient care and enables hospitals to run well. Now, not all janitors are like this, of course, but the ones who are think that these sorts of human interactions involving kindness, care, and empathy are an essential part of the job, and yet their job description contains not one word about other human beings. These janitors have the moral will to do right by other people, and beyond this, they have the moral skill to figure out what doing right means.
Okay, we'll stop it there. I'm going to move forward and talk about how that's fostered. So when we use things in the school system like punishments and bribes, we're trying to I just put a girl here in the middle. You pretend that she is a student in your school or maybe one of your children. The research has found over and over again that children tend to, if this is the consistent way of disciplining them, they tend to ask this question from punishment: what do they want me to do? What happens to me if I do it? And from bribes, what do they want me to do, or what do I get if I do it? Both of them foster self-interest. So instead of fostering empathy and kindness and thinking of other people and doing something not just right, but for the right reasons, which is, it's not enough to just say, well, we want our kids to act in certain ways. And pretty soon they become actors. And what do? They don't have the character to do what's right when people aren't looking because they were acting when people were looking. Because they haven't got it into their heart and developed the moral will to do what was right. So, some of these things that can come from this consistent type of discipline, and we could be teaching the greatest content all day long on morals, but if we're doing it this way, they'll become grade-focused, and they may rebel. They may become compliant, but maybe not in the way that we'd like. They could become indifferent, self-centered, low self-respect, unmotivated, and dishonest. Indeed, the bully who was bullying the guy in the picture I showed you earlier may be struggling with a lot of these things. And then he gets a quick punishment. Nobody wants to listen to what he's thinking, feeling, and deciding because all we care about the behavior, and we don't know how to work with them. We just only know how to do things to them. So if we want to develop morality, we need to have a working with approach, not a doing to. This is not a fancy way of saying letting kids do whatever they want. Sometimes people have this either or. It's either you are punitive or you're permissive, and that's all you can do. I think we have a bigger toolbox that we need to tap into when we're trying to teach morality. Here's another way of looking at it: teaching and guidance and secure and trusting relationships between teacher and student and between administrator and student. What kind of person do I want to become? We want the students to be asking that question rather than what happens to me if I don't do it. And then another question we'd like them to ask, is this right? And how will my choices impact others around them? Again, the empathy, the kindness. So we want them to develop a love for learning, be helpful, friendly. I was going to say the Scout motto: thoroughly courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, truthful, brave, clean, reverent. Okay, so hardworking, helpful, empathic, respect for self and others, and kind, responsible, honest. This is a video of my daughter. I filmed her. She's telling me, because for the sake of time, I'll skip it. Although I'm going to just show you so you can see how cute she is.
Okay, so wait, help me.
She's telling me about why she wants to hurry and read a book.
So every
and get it over
pink
with.
thing means what?
I read. Those blank means I didn't.
The blank means what?
I didn't read. So I forgot to read today. So let's go find a book.
Whoa. Well, hold on. Before we get the book, I need you to explain one more thing. You said you enjoy reading. Do you? But what do you want even more than reading, did you just tell me?
The pizza ticket.
So if you get all the way to here...
Yes, I get a pizza ticket.
From Pizza Pie Cafe?
I forgot.
But you get pizza.
Yeah. She said it was blah, blah, blah pizza ticket.
So what you just tried to do...
I'll stop it there. Unfortunately, the research has bared this out over and over again. The more you reward kids for doing something, the more they tend to lose interest in whatever they had to do to get the reward. Blah, 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 pizza ticket. Morals, blah, 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 whatever you want me to do. So we have to be careful. Now, you may be thinking, but Tim, I know people who were rewarded into doing things, and now they have a love for it. But let's focus on the rule, not the exception, because some people, as we know, too much of our law has been focused on the exception rather than the rule. Okay, so let me give you another story. This happened at one of my children's schools several years ago. It's not the school they currently attend, so I can share this. It's Christmas season, and your child's school is trying to help raise money for families in need. The principal and faculty get together to discuss how they can raise both money and awareness for those in need while teaching their students it is better to give than to receive. All at the meeting agree that, in addition to their regular curriculum, the children should learn to give and serve others less fortunate. It is decided that setting a specific goal or a dollar amount would give the children and teachers something to shoot for. If the children raise enough money to reach the goal, dollar amount, they would be able to begin their Christmas break a half day early. If they don't reach the goal, then children will be in school the entire last day of school before the break originally planned. They thought this was a good idea. When I share this in my parenting class, my students would go, after we've gone over the research, they go, what were they thinking? And I said, well, what are the students learning? School is a punishment, so you have to get out of it for a reward, or learning is a punishment. Another one is, it is not better to give. It's better to just try to get the dollar amount, and if you didn't achieve it, we really don't care about these needy families. So I'm not getting into experiencing giving to them. In fact, this is what it might look like for somebody to actually give versus, hey, I got out of school early, yay, maybe some people were helped. That is not that to me is not a moral way of doing things, even though it is well-intentioned. Let me skip ahead. This is a quote from Alfie Kohn, who's an education reformer. Rewards and punishments are instruments for controlling people, and the real problem is the belief that teachers should be in control of the classroom and that the principal objective, and sometimes the objective of the principal, is just to get students to comply. I won't go into this story. Well, I'll just say that I have a student in my parenting class who said, hey, Brother Eric, my high school, there's a club zero, or it's called the Zero Club. And if you have a zero in any class, you can't go to, you have to be part of the Zero Club. And you have to go to kind of like this detention to study. You don't get any guidance. You don't get any understanding. You just go there and then until you get your zero gone. These students don't learn to love learning. Nobody asks them, is there a divorce going on at home? Or are you being abused? Is there something? There's no, let's try to strengthen the relationship between teacher and student. It just helps them develop an identity that I'm in Club Zero. So I'm going to get here. Yeah, I know, it's really dramatic, I'm sorry. Anyhow, this is some quotes about the research about punishment, but I'm going to skip ahead on that and get to let me give you a solution because I'm out of time. What do we do instead? How do we develop it? Well, one columnist says that policeman laws can never replace customs, traditions, and moral values as a means for regulating human behavior. So we can't just mandate it from the law. Okay, so this is from the parenting pyramid. If I was going to adapt this for a teacher-student relationship, the teacher, as best as we can, has to believe in being honest and responsible, and their own personal way of being has to reflect that, so they model it for the students in their classroom. We're going to skip the husband-wife relationship because that doesn't apply here. But the teacher-child relationship, the children are going to ask again and again, or say again and again, whether or not they say it, they're feeling, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. Children will start to thrive when they feel empowered, somebody wants to help them, rather than just push them off to the side until you start acting the way I want. Correction should be the last thing, and our correction is only effective as our teaching, and our teaching is only effective and as strong as our relationship with our students. This is a basic model that really works. The author of this said, control will sometimes coerce compliance from a child, but it will never win allegiance and commitment to the teacher's professed values, and never foster child's growth and personal responsibility. So, care about them. Show them how a moral person lives. Let them practice in the ways that both the previous speakers talked about. Let them practice moral dilemmas and why it's important to understand about and care about other people. Consequences should be, what are the consequences of my actions to other people, not just to myself? And finally, we should have we've got two primary questions we can come, schools of thought. When a student does something wrong, we could either option one, he has done something bad, now something bad must be done to him, or option two, we have a problem here, how are we going to solve it? I know this works because I see it in my classrooms, I see it with my children, and loads of research bears this out. And as soon as we can start to create a cultural shift, and it's going to have to happen at all different levels, a shift in how we implement morals and character, education will fall flat to develop it, and we'll just focus on compliance and drive the issues deeper under the surface. Thank you.